Sure. I think one of the reasons that I and others at Honeywell attend this conference is to build our network, that informal network of people that you can call up and ask a question to and get their experience, and then, of course, reciprocate, is really the type of information that could propel your program forward in the face of uncertainty. So, during COVID, what are other people doing with regard to return to work questions or PPE questions or vaccination questions, or all things that, of course, we reach out to peer companies and exchange ideas on, and bring those ideas back and use it to influence our program. And so we are always responding to the challenge of the day. But I will say in this last year, we've also placed a premium on continuing to focus in on our program. It's not just employee safety and health that was stressed during COVID. It was declining sales and chasing opportunities more aggressively than ever before, which raises, maybe in a heightened sense, the very traditional risk profile that many of us work with every day. And so we really did make sure that we watched our normal business processes, made sure that they worked effectively, benchmarked digital solutions. Like, as Tom said, none of us traveled last year. Well, how can you do your job if you don't travel? What substitutes for that? And to get those ideas from others, I think, is an important part of networking. Whether it's formal benchmarking really will depend on if we do it the next year or not. And so, there are unique challenges from this last year, but also some of the traditional things we do are more prized than ever before. And we had to split our attention to do that. And I just want to jump in on the question of, what's your target be and best in class? Because as I heard my colleagues speak, I think we have a full range of perspectives on this topic. For us, we're a very large company, a Fortune 70 company. And so I think where you should be on the maturity curve is an expectation of your risk and your company's maturity, and the downside of not being at the best in class. So for us, we don't do it because we like to say we're the best in class. We do it because when the time comes and our regulator asks us, what have you done in order to ensure that a mistake is an escape and not corporate behavior, we have to be in that top quartile. And so benchmarking is the way that we don't remain static, right? What was in the top quartile last year is not the top quartile this year. And so we use benchmarking as a way to try to propel our program forward in advance of a problem instead of in response to a problem. And so, I think this panel will give you a perspective of different types of companies and places that they aim on what I call the maturity curve. But there's no right answer for everybody, but you have to have a right answer for your environment. And for us, it is to aim for that top quartile.
Vic, it's a great transition to expectations of, as you eloquently put, in terms of the why and measuring it with respect to the maturity level and risk associated, also expectations from a regulatory perspective. And so, I think all of us, and lots of folks in the audience very familiar with the DOJ guidance on corporate compliance programs and the expectations that folks are trying to measure through and evaluating all of the components, whether a program is well designed and is it being applied in good faith, and more importantly, how are you determining whether it's being effective in terms of practice in an everyday scenario. So Reagan, I wanted to turn to you and get your thoughts on it in the lens of benchmarking vis-a-vis guidance that has been provided, and what sort of the practical implications, considerations folks should evaluate, tying with what you mentioned before, which is it's going to be depending on facts and circumstances for an organization, but some guiding principles I think folks would be very appreciative of.
Yeah, no, and thanks. And Vic, your point is well taken. I mean, this is what makes this so hard and why this discussion is important. And there need to be discussions beyond this. It's not easy. It's not The standards are not, it's not like toilet paper, 2-ply is good and 1-ply is bad, right? I mean, there's not just, it's not a yay or nay question. There's a lot of different intricacies. And frankly, you mentioned the guidance DOJ has provided that, this has been improved and updated over the years, 2017, 2019, just last year. And that's good. And obviously it's helpful and better than nothing. The reality is a lot of it are questions that you should ask yourselves, right? And I've talked to some clients who say, look, I don't need questions, I need answers. And the reality, though, is that there's not one answer. And so the questions is how regulators do it. They ask really important questions. And the answer has to come from all of these factors. And there's just too many permutations of answers for a lot of these questions, which can be frustrating. But I also saw that Ron asked a really important question about, well, can this exercise be counterproductive because you're actually chasing a metric that's not applicable? And that's really, really important. I want to make that point because the problem with a cookie cutter approach is, for example, for some companies, having a supplier code of conduct is absolutely critical. You'd be crazy not to have it, or to have a responsible sourcing program that you've really dedicated personnel to, critical. For others, that would not be in the top 10 list of things you should be thinking about necessarily, right? So if you just go to a cookie cutter approach, you may be spending time, money, personnel, effort to put in place a policy procedure that really is, it probably won't necessarily do any harm, but does it really do good relative to the time you're spending on it? So I think that this is the challenge. And of course, the answer that I would give is talk to experts like Liban and me and others, because we're constantly before regulators, we have our finger on the pulse of what they expect, and we can give you those answers and you can have reliance on it. But that's not always a really satisfying answer. People would love to have sort of some greater certainty. And I think the reality is we don't have that and won't have that. But as you get more mature, both within your own positions and as we all get, have more experience under our belt, seeing the types of enforcement actions that come out, et cetera, we'll be able to draw more and more certainty about how regulators expect, just in time for the goalpost to change, of course, right? As new laws are passed and as new enforcement trends take place.